Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Back at it with another YouTube live show here tonight. I am John Kurtz, and tonight we got to talk about a league under fire. The Big 12 is taking lots of criticism across the college football world for its support of the 5+11 college football playoff model, in which all four Power Five conference champions will be granted an automatic bid. A group of 6 automatic bid would be included, and everybody else would be an at-large selection. Joel Klatt and Josh Pate, in particular, have come really hard after the Big 12, and so we've got to look at here, what exactly did the league do? Is it a big mistake? Is it a big mistake? Let's ask that question here tonight, okay? Let's do it. I see you guys, lots of early love for the question that we are asking tonight. Has the Big 12 made a big mistake by hitching its wagon to the 5+11 college football playoff model? Because there are many who would tell you they absolutely have. And frankly, listening to the Josh Pate and Joel Klatts of the world, like, it's hard to dispute a lot of what they are saying, okay? And I've had a couple of people reach out to me almost in a panic, like, hey, man, are you listening to what these guys are saying? Like, what do you make of this? Like, have we been led astray here? Should we come after Brett Yormark? Well, look, I don't think the Big 12 has a good choice either way in this whole thing. And I think Brett Yormark is still correct in the position that he's taking, even if I frankly agree with most, if not all, of what Joel Klatt and Josh Pate are saying. So I know that's a lot to try and sort through, and you're doing some mental gymnastics to try and figure that out. I promise I will walk you through it here on the show tonight. That's why we are here. So thank you. Thank you, chat, for such a lovely greeting tonight. Back from vacation. You guys don't seem very happy about this. Mr. Warren, not happy about the headline. Hank doesn't like the caption. Nobody happy. But I had a good, nice little break in Wisconsin. This is the problem. You go to a lake house in Wisconsin and try and get away for 3 days, and you can't escape anything, because even in freaking June, we have news rolling in and lots to talk about here. So we're going to do that. I'm going to examine why Brett Yormark is taking this position, as you can see on the outline there. I think it's pretty obvious if you look through his resume why it is that he's landed on this position that he has, as far as what he is taking here. And Greg Sankey trying to pull a bit of a fast one as well, especially if it gets to the 5+11 model. So there are lots of things to watch out for. I mean, you knew that Sankey and Petiti, but particularly Sankey, would be swimming around trying to pull something, do whatever they can to angle this even further and further toward their own conference. So, take a deep breath. We'll try to end on a lighter note with just the shout out to Athlon, okay, one of the college football mags that I'm sure I know I did growing up, always would buy every single year, along with, of course, the Phil Steele, maybe a Lindy's or two here, there. But they do the anonymous comments from coaches, and we have the Big 12 anonymous comments. So we're going to hear what Big 12 coaches think about teams around the league, and they picked, I would say, 2 teams. 2 teams got a lot of love for who they think could be the future of the league. So we'll have that coming up as well. You guys know the drill. Keep lighting me up in the chat. Whatever it is that you want to talk about in there, bring that on. And if you want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show tonight, you can click the $ below the chat box to submit a super chat, which, again, great way to support the channel. Plus, it's just a way to guarantee that your question or comment makes it on tonight. So I appreciate everybody who does that, but it doesn't just take money. You can support me totally for free by simply liking the video, by subscribing to the channel. That really helps me as well. Also, by subscribing to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com to subscribe to that, or you can click the link in the description of this video. I just finished up my Open for Business, which you can probably guess what a lot of that's going to be about. But if you want Big 12 news straight to your inbox twice a week, breaking down the big picture stories like this and how they relate to the Big 12, that's how you get it. ofbnews.com. Also, John-Kurtz-4, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you are not watching live and you'd like your question or comment to make it on, I'll kick off the next show with it if you leave it for me at John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. Okay, I see Big 12 Mafia tells me it was all hands on deck since last Friday to defend Brett Yormark. Well, look, I will certainly defend where Brett Yormark is coming from. What I'm not going to tell you tonight is that Brett Yormark is like definitively making the right decision. I don't think that there is a right decision, quote unquote, here. I think you're choosing from two evils, and I can understand exactly why Brett Yormark is doing this, even if others on the other side make very, very compelling points. And that is where we start. Look, I mean, the Big 12 is getting pretty well crushed by two guys who do pay the respect to Yormark in the league and say, like, hey, I think there are smart people here. But here comes the crushing of the Big 12. So the league is taking it from all angles right now. But I still think that Brett Yormark is right, at least on principle, in what he is doing. Okay, so here's a brief synopsis, just for those who have not been paying as much attention, which, I mean, goodness, I wish some days that I weren't as online and in the weeds of this so that I could just enjoy a nice June summer day at the lake like you probably are instead of having to be wrapped up in this. So here's what we've got. The Big Ten is very dug in on their plan that they have proposed, their format. They want the 4 auto bids for the SEC and Big Ten, 2 auto bids for the Big 12 and ACC, 1 for the Group of 5, and then beyond that, a couple of at-larges, 3 at-larges. Meanwhile, the Big 12 introduced the 5+11 plan. It's now supported by the SEC, mostly supported by the SEC. ACC, Notre Dame, also behind the 5+11 with 11 at-large selections. SEC coaches love it because they don't want the play-in games that have been proposed for conference championship weekend in the SEC because they don't want an extra game before then going to the playoff. They think there will be too much wear and tear. ESPN, according to Ross Dellinger, is not a fan of the 4-4-2-2-1 format that the Big Ten likes. Okay, that's another wrench in here. The Big Ten has said they will not budge on going to the 5+11 plan unless the SEC plays a 9-game conference schedule, because the Big Ten, understandably, feels like it's a competitive disadvantage for them. Meanwhile, on that front, the SEC has, we've got all these decisions to make. Sankey's talking about the 2026 playoff format discussion rolling into the fall. And the SEC has to make a decision by the end of the summer on what they're going to do for a conference schedule next year. So you've got conflicting things here. Big Ten says, we won't agree to your plan unless you agree to 9 conference games. Sankey is saying, we may not agree to any format until the fall, but before then, we have to make a decision on how many conference games we're playing next year. It's a mess. It's a mess. That's the point here. It is a mess, okay? But all of this has very, very real consequences. For instance, for the SEC, there's a lot of money on the line. Ross Dellinger reported they'd be passing up $5 million plus per school. Okay, $5 million plus per school if they do not go with the 4 auto bid plan. Because if they did that, those playing games would net them $5 million plus per school, plus the revenue from the 9th conference game. Okay, then if we're talking about the Big Ten and SEC potentially just deciding to go do their own thing, if they don't like the result of this and nobody is coming to any kind of agreement, it's too messy. Ross Dellinger did report that in essence is on the table, and Josh Pate really kind of reiterated that this week too. But Dellinger says the Big 12, ACC, Notre Dame, and several group of 6 conferences are strongly fighting against that 4 auto bid format. The battle has turned feisty on the public scene and could result in legal action. Big 12 and ACC officials don't seem to be backing down. Would the Big 10 and SEC really leave the playoff to start their own playoff with just the 2 of them? So this is getting pretty heated. It's getting pretty serious. Now, unfortunately, just because of the nature of YouTube and all that, like, I can't directly play you the Joel Klatt and Josh Pate comments here. I can give you a synopsis of them, but would highly suggest hopping over to their channels or my Twitter account at JL Kurtz. You can definitely see the Joel Klatt condensed version that is on Twitter. I would highly suggest that you go look at that. But here is the argument from both of them. They're pretty much in lockstep on why it is that they really, really like the 4 auto bid format and why they do not at all like the 5+11 format, particularly for the Big 12. So as it relates to the Big 12, their point is, look, man, last year was a down year for the SEC. We would all agree to that. And if you took the top 16 in the final playoff rankings, there would have been 6 SEC teams in that playoff. So instead of 4, it would have been 6. And I have already told you there was only one Big 12 team in the top 16 because BYU was at 17. So you would have only had one Big 12 team in. So instead of a 4-2 disparity between the SEC and Big 12 in the playoff, it would have been 6-1 potentially last year. Okay. So their point is you keep doing that year over year, it's going to widen the gap even more. It will hurt your perception even more. That's going to be a worse thing than just signing up to take 4-2. Like, why would you do that? That is not a smart gamble or bet or anything. There's also, from a bigger picture standpoint here, like Josh Pate really mentioned, he likes it in general because with the SEC playing games hanging out there at the end of the year, it will create a much more intriguing conference race because teams can't just say, well, we're 9-1 with a couple weeks left. We're in the playoff no matter what, because we'll get an at-large bid. They'll now have to say, well, wait, there's a pretty big carrot here. If we can get in the top 2 of the conference, we wouldn't have to worry about these conference playing games here at the end of the year. So that's a little bit more incentive for us to keep going, puts more emphasis on the regular season. Look, all pretty good points. Now, I have to say, I don't really care that much about the Big Ten and SEC's regular season at the end of the year. I know I probably should if I were going to be worried for the greater good of college football. And slight lean that way, sure. Yeah, that'd be great if it worked out like that. I much more care about the Big 12, but I can't really refute his Big 12 point there. I've already conceded that. Like that was part of my surprise with some of this people coming to me. I was like, guys, I already told you this. I mean, I told you that the 4-2 thing, you're going to wind up with more Big 12 teams in the playoff over the course of the next 6 years for this agreement, if that's what you do as opposed to 5-11. We know that a committee is not going to favor the Big 12 as opposed to just getting the 2 at large. I've already said that. But they kind of took it further and said this will absolutely crush the Big 12's reputation, perception, opportunity, all of these different things. And it's hard. It's hard to dispute that, man. It is. I don't have like a great comeback directly for that. So if you came here expecting me to say, well, here's why that's wrong and the data is incorrect and any of that, I don't have any of that. I've got nothing to say as far as that goes. There's just one thing that is the key point here, and that is missing in what is being argued by Klatt and Pate. And that is their entire thesis, their entire argument revolves around one truth that they believe and embrace, and that Brett Yormark absolutely cannot believe and embrace as the leader of the Big 12. And that belief from Pate and Klatt is that the Big 12 is an inferior conference and always will be. And if that is your belief, then yes, it certainly stands to reason. Hey, take what you can, get the 4-2 split, deem yourself half of that league, and go forward from there. And try your best. Do what you can from that standpoint. Brett Yormark, though, cannot, as the leader of the conference, willingly embrace that. If it turns out that the Big Ten wins out in this battle between Big Ten and SEC and you get the 4 auto bid format, that's one thing. But if you willingly sign on the dotted line, hey, we are lesser than, we are half of your conference, that carries a lot of big picture implications that go beyond just thinking about this college football playoff format and what teams are getting in. Okay? That's a pretty big deal. And, some more recommended like reading/watching I would send to you today is John Wilner, another piece that I quote tweeted on my timeline today. John Wilner absolutely nailed it. He wrote a column about exactly this. And he was so right. It was such a good piece on the predicament facing Brett Yormark and why he can't really sign up for this. Okay. So I look at it like this. The Big 12 is trying to maintain like self-respect and dignity here. Like that's what Brett Yormark is trying to do. And you're in a lose-lose situation. So is the ACC, by the way, but probably to a lesser extent because with the bigger brands, like Clemson, Florida State, Miami, the ACC stands a better chance of getting multiple teams in, even in the 5+11 format, than the Big 12 does. But you're in a lose-lose situation because you either take the one path, which means you're at risk of a committee and 11 at-large bids and just getting screwed every single year by how many SEC and Big Ten teams will get in, or you sign your life away as being lesser than forever. Like, you literally willingly sign on the dotted line, I'm giving up my dignity and self-respect here as a conference. Those are the only two choices, and they both suck. Like, that, neither one is good. Neither one is good. And Brett Yormark, as the leader of the Big 12, who has to oversee all this big stuff and worry about the brand and reputation of the league, is not really willing right now to give up said self-respect and dignity, right, just for 2 auto bids every single year. They will not accept that premise that the Big 12 and ACC, Brett Yormark and Jim Phillips, will not accept that premise that the Big 12 and ACC are inferior and always will be. You can call that naive. You can call that stupid, misguided, whatever it is that you might want. But I will point out here that you take some pretty big credibility and brand hits if you do that. Think about this. The next time you're negotiating a TV deal, okay, the TV networks will look at this and, no matter what's happened, remember some of these private equity plans that the Big 12 had been kicking around for a while, they were claiming there would be some pretty massive growth out of the league. But your next TV contract, whoever you're negotiating with, ESPN, Fox, Apple, whoever, they'll look at it and be like, all right, well, what's the Big Ten and SEC deal? All right, well, you're not getting a penny more than half of that because you've already willingly admitted that you are half of those leagues. So why would I ever give you a penny more than that? Let's think about like negative recruiting, right? I mean, pretty easy to negatively recruit if you're an SEC or a Big Ten school. Like, hey, these guys literally signed up to say they're only half as good a conference as us. Why would you go to school there? It's a tough thing for a coach to combat. It may even be a thing, an attitude that a coach wouldn't like and put you more at risk of losing some of those coaches, right? Not exactly a message that I think coaches are going to resonate with. The other thing is, Yormark has talked about this. Other ADs in the league have talked about this recently. I think Mac Rhodes at Baylor was the last one to have a public comment about this. But, man, the message from Yormark has been, hey, guys, like, we've got to try to compete at the highest level. We've got to pour the resources in to do our best to compete at the highest level here. Like, that's the goal. The goal is not to just settle into, hey, we're half this league, the SEC or Big Ten. Like, we've got to try and compete. And if you're pushing that message, like, we're going to compete at the top and that's what we do, you can't then let your action be, well, I'm going to go sign up and say that we are willingly half than these other two conferences. You're telling everybody, try and push past that. Like, bet on yourself, push past that. You can't send that message and then sign up to say, well, no, actually, hey, guys, just push for being half of what the Big Ten and the SEC are. So that's the problem here. Like, that's the conundrum that Yormark has. That's why he can't really sign up for that. He can't really sign up for that. Neither can Jim Phillips. The other thing is, I mean, look, the second that you would agree to 4-4-2-2-1, SEC is immediately going to 9 conference games. Big Ten and SEC are immediately entering a scheduling agreement. You're going to be locked out from ever playing them in a non-conference game. They'll get more money, right? I already mentioned that $5 million that they'll get for the 9th conference game. There's even more that they'll get for those play-in games on conference championship weekend, which they'll be able to double the monetary value of whatever you're going to get, at least for that, because they can do 2 of those games. It just furthers their monopoly. So, look, even Josh Pate kind of laid this out, and I thought this was really pretty smart. And this would be one thing I might say back to him if he were really arguing vehemently against Yormark in the Big 12. I would just say, hey, you said yourself, the SEC and Big Ten seem to be really wanting to just break off and do their own thing, but without having the look of being the ultimate bad guy right now and putting themselves at legal risk. So, hey, maybe the idea is we'll throw them a bunch of terrible options, like crazy, unrealistic options that put them at a huge disadvantage, wait for them to say no, and then we'll throw our arms up and say, well, hey, we tried. And if they do agree to it, then, well, great. They're stupid for that. And so if that is the case, which is something that he has said, well, then the 4-4-2-2-1 plan is kind of the stupid plan. And the Big 12 and ACC are saying, well, we're not going to do that. We will force you to pull out of this and be the bad guy. We're not going to help you along with any of this. If you really truly want to do this, you guys go do it. We're not going to help you do that. That's really where I feel like this is. So none of it is good. None of it is good. Certainly none of it is good for the Big 12. I don't think any of it is good for the sake of the sport, but here we are. That's what we've got. Now there are many other tentacles to this that I'm definitely going to get to. If you want to chime in and make sure your question or comment makes it on the show tonight, click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. You can also just keep filling up the regular chat. Lively as always, I see. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. That is totally free. Many of you who watch are not subscribed. It would mean a lot if you did subscribe. Really appreciate all of that. Please do subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter as well, ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com in order to subscribe to that. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you're not watching live. The other part of this that's really interesting, as I mentioned, the Big 12 is getting criticized all over the place for not only, again, I think this is underreported, not only supporting the 5+11 college football playoff model, but literally creating it, like being the ones to suggest it. That was reported by Ross Dellinger. Big 12 is getting a lot of criticism, and there are many that seem genuinely perplexed. Like, okay, why is Brett Yormark going this route? Why would he do this? It really shouldn't be very surprising. I am, play this game, a little surprised that people are surprised. Okay. So let me explain. Like, for instance, Joel Klatt, I know, said, like, hey, I know there are smart people at the Big 12. Josh Pate, Brett Yormark's a really smart guy. You hear these in the commentaries of those folks. It shows there is a healthy level of respect for Yormark out there, and there has to be for the fact that he got the Big 12 through the Big 12 Pac-12 thing. It outlasted the Pac-12, a league that had 100+ years of history and a lot in terms of reputation on the Big 12. He outfoxed them. He got that TV deal done, quite literally outfoxed them. See what I did there? And helped the conference survive through that. He's been very good with the big picture vision here. Now, this is where it's starting to come into question. All right, big picture vision. This is maybe the first time that real big picture vision has been questioned in terms of a move that's like tangibly, legitimately been made by Yormark here. So why would Brett Yormark do this? Their point is, hey, this could mean 6 SEC teams get in the field in a down year like this past year would have happened had we gone top 16, and the Big 12 never gets more than one. Why would you do that? Why would you sign up for that? Why would you not see that this is just going to widen the gap to the point where you're going to be in so much trouble? You're going to screw yourself. You'll have less opportunities to win games in the playoff, all of that. And first of all, I think Brett Yormark is smart enough, like they're saying, to realize that. Like, absolutely. I think he is smart enough to realize that, and he knows that he has an awful hand either way. But as I just laid out for you a moment ago, so much of this is just about him being backed into a corner. Like, I can't, as the guy with this big picture vision, I'm all about brand, and I'm all about making sure that we are as big as we can possibly be. Nothing about Brett Yormark is thinking small. I can't willingly sign up to then be half of a conference. And his history should tell you. His history should tell you he was never going to do that. That's a part of my point here in all of this. Like, what about Brett Yormark's background would have ever told you that this would not be the way that he would go? I think even if you would have told me, because as recently as like 2-3 weeks ago, I was sitting here saying, like, hey guys, yeah, look on the bright side. I mean, this 4 auto bid thing does suck, but look on the bright side. 2 Big 12 teams in every year. It's a pretty nice consolation prize to having to sign away all of this. But even then, I would have said that doesn't seem like something Brett Yormark would like just come out and do. Like, just come out and lie down and be like, all right, fine. You guys win. Here, take it. You didn't hear a whole lot about what was going on behind the scenes or how it would actually go down. But that was my thought at the time. Like, that doesn't seem like what Brett Yormark would do, even if I'm resigned to this. I would have thought Brett Yormark probably is less resigned to his fate than I was, because as a fan or somebody that's just paying attention to this closely, I don't know that I would call myself a media member, technically, content creator, whatever it is you want to say. People that are following this closely, you just get weary. You just get weary of this. Like, all right, like, we've been told we're inferior for so long. Everything seems so inevitable. The SEC and Big Ten continue to tilt the power more and more in their favor. Like, what chance, what opportunity do you really actually have? Okay. So I had kind of gotten to that point, but I would have thought, well, Brett Yormark probably isn't there. Brett Yormark probably isn't there because Brett Yormark is a guy who not only just in everything he's done in his time at the Big 12 has been thinking like big picture. Let's go big. We're not backing down. But everything about his resume before that really suggests it, right? Like, remember, this is the guy. Here's one thing. Brett Yormark moved the Nets from New Jersey to Brooklyn. That's a massive undertaking to move the Nets from New Jersey to Brooklyn. He secured the Barclays deal for the Barclays Center. That was huge, huge news at the time. And very much in the like, hey, I'm thinking big, grandiose with all of this. That was from a branding standpoint, great move for the Nets. Not that the basketball has really been all that good from a branding standpoint, however, great move for the Nets. He also, I think this gets underreported or at least not talked about much in the college football world, but Brett Yormark, during his time at NASCAR, oversaw the largest naming rights deal in the history of American sports. The largest naming rights deal in the history of American sports for NASCAR. He was thinking big, even with something like, does Brett Yormark seem like a NASCAR guy? Do the suits reflect somebody who seems like he's a NASCAR guy? But when he was there, he was thinking big. Brett Yormark doesn't exactly seem like a truck stop conference guy. I don't know. Could you picture Yormark walking into Buc-ee's and grabbing his favorite flavor of beef jerky off of their wall of like 800 types of beef jerky that they have there and walking out? No, but he is here and he is thinking big. He is thinking big with all of this. And then he's a guy who does all of that in the sports world and is like, well, let me just go run Jay-Z's entertainment company. Let me just go be the biggest man in charge of, outside of the man himself, I suppose, of Jay-Z's entertainment company at Rock Nation. Does that seem like a guy who's going to be like, you know what? Here's this proposal. This actually seems okay. We're never going to be the best. We're never going to be that great, but we can at least have our couple of playoff bids and we'll sign up for inferiority. We'll sign up for lesser than. Does that sound like it matches the resume of Brett Yormark? Like, I feel like you could just show me the resume, talk about blind resume and like an NCAA tournament comparison, right? Show me just the blind resume of Brett Yormark and be like, would that guy sign up for this 4-4-2-2-1 deal? Would he do that? And I'd say, hell no. No, that guy's going to be like, we'll bet on ourselves. We're going to pursue every possible avenue, whether it's private equity, capital, whatever, to get the money we need to be legitimately competitive at the top of the sport. Yormark would be like, we need more Texas Techs. We got to find more ways for more schools to be like Texas Tech and try and spend their way to a top portal class and into the college football playoff. That's more the side that Brett Yormark would appear to be on. And I would just say this too. There is something to be said. I'll close with this in a minute. I will not crush you at all if you're somebody that thinks 4-4-2-2-1 is the better option. Like I said, I am supposed to be a guy with an opinion. I mean, I kind of straddle the fence here. Like, it scares me to go 5+11, even though I understand why Yormark has to do it. But I do at least appreciate, and I have said this over and over again throughout the Yormark era, I do at least appreciate a commissioner who's like, dude, screw this. I'm fighting for the self-respect of this conference. Like, in the face of adversity, in the face of not having a very good hand, I am fighting for the self-respect of this conference. Nobody has done it. Decades of passive leadership. Getting pushed around by Texas, getting pushed around by whoever in the media, Oklahoma that during that 2016 faux expansion pursuit, like all pushed around at every turn, never controlling a narrative, never fighting for itself. Brett Yormark is doing that. He is doing that. Could it be a catastrophically wrong move? It could. It sure could. But if it is a catastrophically wrong move, it would be a catastrophically wrong move that you were going to be screwed in some form or fashion either way. Because if the 5+11 winds up being that much worse for the Big 12 than 4-4-2-2-1 would have been, then we were all headed for a future that nobody was really going to like anyway. I guess that's the other point that I would make here. Like, nobody was going to be happy with the future of 4-4-2-2-1 if 5+11 is that much worse on its head. Like, neither of these are good options. There's a very limited ceiling. You're signing up for a ceiling with 4-4-2-2-1. You're signing up for a ceiling. You can never break through that. That is not a glass ceiling. That is a concrete ceiling that you're signing up for. And Yormark is refusing to do that and saying, I believe that there could be a better future than this very limited one that we would be signing up for. Could totally be wrong. That it actually will be worse with 5+11 could absolutely happen. Not disputing that. But I think if that is the case, then you aren't going to be really happy either way. And people who are already really disenchanted with this are going to continue to get more and more disenchanted if that is our reality. So I'm not going to crush you. I was going to scroll back up through some of the comments. I know we have a super chat. I was going to scroll back up through some of the comments there because I saw like Big 12 Mafia talking about this a little bit and looked like Big 12 Mafia was kind of on the other side of this. Let's see this here. Big 12 Mafia. They gave that college football power away last year, John. Is anyone really thinking they will get it back in any way? He already signed up for that. I assume there, Big 12 Mafia, you were talking about the giving up your auto bid, which happened recently, and I was upset about that, where Yormark just kind of said, hey, it's for the greater good of the game. Yeah, okay. Fair enough point that there's a little bit of inconsistency with that, in that you're giving up your, did I say auto bid? Your auto buy, giving up the buy for this upcoming year. I didn't love that decision. I don't think it's nearly as impactful because it's just for 1 year as opposed to long term. But if that's what you're talking about, it is fair to point out that it is a little bit sending the wrong message. If you're talking about like literally just allowing the Big Ten and the SEC to have the power to make decisions in their contracts, what exactly do you suggest that Yormark would have done then? That would have, because if you refuse that, and if you refuse the revenue structure, if you're talking about specifically the revenue distribution on that, which broke heavily toward the Big Ten and the SEC, they were literally threatening at that time, we'll leave, we'll walk. So if you were really comfortable with right now, all of us being in a world where you're not even playing the same sport, literally, as the Big Ten and the SEC, then okay. I guess that could have been the move there. Maybe there was some calculation as to, all right, these are like direct threats right now. We're going to stand down on this for the time being. There is a little bit of, not so much like hypocrisy, but just like waffling. There is a little bit of waffling there. I'm not going to lie. I don't think that that's a terrible point. But I also don't think that it is as impactful as what signing up for this would be. And I think it could have just been a kind of a calculation at that point in time on the risks, like a risk-reward calculation at that point in time, and what Yormark felt the SEC and Big Ten were actually willing and capable of doing at that point. All right, Wazoo Revenge. What's up, Wazoo Revenge? Thank you for being here. Describe a world/season with the SEC and Big Ten. What would happen with everything? Well, I'm a little confused here, Wazoo Revenge. Help me out. What do you mean a world/season with the SEC and Big Ten? And what would happen with everything? I apologize that I'm not 100% following you on this. Describe a world season. Well, because I can definitely describe a world and season with the Big Ten and the SEC because, they're very much alive and well and very much here. It would probably be a lot of complaining and a lot of hypotheticals that the SEC wins every single time. So keep me up to date there. Keep me up to date there. Wazoo, and I will try to answer that. Like, you don't have to create a super chat anymore. I'll pay attention to the chat there if you want to get that back in and clarify that for me, so that I can give you a better answer. Yeah, man. These topics are a bummer. These topics are a bummer. Okay. Well, here's what I've got next. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. You can submit a super chat by clicking the $ below the chat box. If you want to make sure your question or comment makes it on tonight, and just to support the work that I'm doing here, I appreciate all of you guys who do that. Genuinely do appreciate that. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you're not watching live and you want to do that. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter as well, ofbnews.com, or click the link in the description of this video. I'm going to respond to this real quick too. I see College Football Mafia. Big Ten and SEC own 68% of the college football voting power. Extortion to leave was an empty threat. We could debate that, how empty that threat actually was last year. But even if it wasn't, I still understand why you would say, if the whole thing was that you were just going to buck up and, not back down, then you should have been keeping that philosophy consistent last year as well. I do understand. I do understand that criticism, and I wanted to bring this comment up because you are clarifying. Yes, it was about the voting power and everything that they did do last year. But maybe I would also posit this. Maybe that was Brett Yormark thinking hey, that was kind of a mistake that we didn't put up as much of a fight then. ACC included. Nobody put up as much of a fight about that then as they are right now. So maybe it was this hey, we're not going to get pushed around anymore. Just a thought there. Wazoo Revenge. Okay, Wazoo Revenge. If the SEC and Big Ten go off on their own. Well, okay, so here's where I think it's a different. Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that. There's a difference between short term and long term here. The short term is, I think you would have a lot of people in SEC and Big Ten country that would be celebrating it. You would have, hopefully not a ton of people nationally in college football that would be really celebrating it. But I think once the season started, obviously most of the coverage is going to gravitate toward that. And in the short term, first couple of seasons, it's going to grab all the headlines and all the attention. But what you would have happen over the long term is those matchups will get a little bit stale, right? It's, conference game between USC and Michigan gets a little more stale. The more it happens, it loses some of that value, right? Anytime you get some sort of new toy, new car, new electronic gadget, right? It's super fun when you get that new iPhone for the first week, 2 weeks, a month, but then it's okay, yeah, it's just another iPhone. Some of that wears off. And you start looking around and you're like, well, wait, we lost some really great rivalries. We don't have near as much interest from large swaths of the country with large fan bases. This thing is not it's starting to lose its edge a little bit here. This feels really weird, just semi-professional football as opposed to it. The more you strip down the soul of the college game, the more it becomes the USFL instead of college football and what made this great. And so over the long term, you have an erosion of the thing that separates it from that, which is going to make it a less valuable property, which is going to get you less in terms of TV ratings, because we've already seen this. People don't watch semi-professional. I keep saying semi-professional leagues like it's freaking Will Ferrell out there. Professional football leagues, but that are not the NFL. Other professional football leagues that are not the NFL. My apologies to anybody that's out there playing in the USFL. But no, people don't watch those as much. So if you lose that soul of college sports, your ratings are going to go down. And over time, when you go for your next TV deal, or maybe your next TV deal after that, it's not going to be worth as much. And that's why I continue to say it's so short-sighted and such a short-term money grab from so many involved in this right now. So that's how I would see it. Wazoo Revenge. That's how I would see it, my friend. Okay. We knew the SEC would try and pull a fast one in all of this college football playoff discussion. They weren't going to go down without doing that. And it's happening right now with this 5+11 model. Greg Sankey has distributed a lot of literature about this, and there is one key thing in particular you really need to pay attention with what has happened here. Okay. Let's look at, so Ross Dellinger dove into the data, first of all, in this 5+11 college football playoff proposal that is now basically supported by the SEC in unison. It was proposed by the Big 12. It goes against what the Big 10 wants, which is the 4 auto bids for each of those 2 conferences. Ross Dellinger says since the 2014 playoff, the Big 10 led all conferences with 59 teams ranked inside of the top 16 of the playoff rankings. It's about 5.3 teams per year. The SEC has averaged 5 per year. The Big 12 has averaged 2.4 per year, and the ACC 2.1. And these are all updated for realignment, right? So Oklahoma and Texas count toward the SEC's numbers. Big 12, by the way, better than the ACC there, which is nice. But that's how it would break down. So Dellinger is trying to basically predict 5+11 model, what that would look like if it went that way, and we're operating with almost all at-larges. Or even, Sankey has floated the idea of like, well, why don't we just go to top 16 and give nobody an automatic bid? Which obviously, that's another way you are playing with fire a little bit here if you are Brett Yormark. So SEC 5 teams, Big 10 just over 5 teams, Big 12 2.4, ACC 2.1. Here's some more from Ross Dellinger. Okay, so many of these quotes, man, you can just already see it. The SEC starts to throw its support behind this. Hey, we'll rely more on a committee for this, and they complain and whine, even though, as I pointed out earlier, last year 6 SEC teams would have been in the top 16 and in a down year for the league, and the committee ranked those teams, and they're going to complain still about the rankings here and try and set the table for we need even better treatment from these things. So Sankey says, perhaps most important, a move to a 5+11 format will necessitate a change to the selection committee's criteria. According to SEC admins and coaches, such a model relies heavily on a committee that many SEC leaders publicly attacked this week. At times, it seemed like a choreographed assault on the committee. This was Scott Strickland, I believe, from Florida. Quote, a committee is not ideal to choose a postseason. I question whether it is appropriate for college football. A committee has been overwhelmingly beneficial to the SEC over the lifetime of having a committee here. Literally last year was the one year where you can't even say it was detrimental to the SEC. It just was not over the top preferential to the SEC. So it's just such a hilarious notion and a hilarious quote there. Joe Castiglione at Oklahoma says the selection committee's role is not to send messages, but the outcome of their decisions do. Yeah, Joe, what was the message that the committee sent in 2023 in leaving out unbeaten ACC champ Florida State in lieu of one-loss Alabama? What was that message? That was a pretty damn big message. That was a bigger message than last year leaving Ole Miss, who lost to 4-win Kentucky, out of the playoff. That was a much bigger message that was sent there. Again, these are hilarious, but you see where this is going. Another quote from an SEC admin. We got away from the old model with the computer, and now we've got it totally subjective. Can we find a way to bring it more to the middle with info on strength of schedule, quality of opponents, things of that nature? I believe that was Brian Kelly. We got away from the computer. Everybody hated the BCS and complained about the BCS incessantly, and now we're saying, you know what? Bring back those computers. South Carolina coach Shane Beamer. Does strength of schedule matter or not? Like, the reason that you had 3-loss SEC teams even being considered last year is because of strength of schedule. That would not have happened in any other conference, but it happened in the SEC because there is a benefit given to strength of schedule there. It just can't be, hey, you play in the best league strength of schedule wise, so no matter what you do, you're getting in over somebody else. That's not a trump card. It's just something that is considered here. Anyway, this is where the SEC is all going, right? Can you see how something diabolical might happen here? They feel very strongly about this. What do we see in America these days? When somebody feels very strongly about something, they will bend facts as much as they possibly can, no matter what the hell side you're on. People will bend facts, no matter what we're talking about, sports, politics, whatever. They'll bend facts. They'll bend reality to make it happen here. So the way this is all setting up, you're thinking, well, John, what is the SEC trying to do? What are they going to try and do with this? Here's what they're going to try and do with it. Part of some of the numbers that were being circulated by Greg Sankey, we pulled the Massey ratings the other day where he was trying to say, look how strong our league is. The average team in our league, we only have 2 teams below. I forget what that was, out of the top 40 or 50. All these other leagues have like 6 or 7. But included in some of those numbers was ESPN's FPI. Now, this is where it really, if you want to get really conspiratorial, if you want to put on your Alex Jones tinfoil hat, this is where you do it. ESPN's FPI being mentioned by Sankey here because, many people, I can understand why, I feel like ESPN has really been in the back pocket of the SEC for a long time here. I do think that they have played a significant role in the rise of the SEC. Not that it hasn't all been unwarranted by the SEC, their rise. I'm not saying that. But they did dramatically help shift that tone over the years by being such an advocate for the conference and being such a good, loyal partner. Now, Sankey's going to say, yeah, hey, our buds over there, ESPN, yeah, your power rankings, we're going to use those because those look pretty good for all of us. Let me just tell you, ESPN FPI is like the king of, hey, we overvalue recruiting rankings, which many people feel like get overly inflated toward the SEC because when an SEC program offers somebody, automatically they're just going to shoot up. And so you can see how this becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. SEC recruiting numbers get juiced because people assume that they are the best teams there. ESPN overvalues recruiting rankings in its computer rankings. And now Sankey is saying, well, yeah, let's use those. Let's use those and have that be a major factor here. That's how this becomes a problem. And if you want a little bit of proof of this, let's have a gander here. Let's have a gander here at what ESPN's FPI has right now for its preseason top 25. Okay, let's count. The first Big 12 team that you have here is 21, K-State. Arizona State's also in there at 24. You have 2 Big 12 teams ranked. Let's count how many SEC teams we get before we get to a Big 12 team. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the top 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 5 in a row. 11. You got 11 SEC teams before you get to 1 Big 12 team. Among that group, Florida and Oklahoma. Auburn, I mean, really, look, Florida, I can understand how you make the case with Lagway, like that they'll be pretty good. Auburn and Oklahoma at 14 and 16 here. Come on, man. Do you guys remember what happened? Let's go directly. Sorry about that. Let's go directly Big 12 comp. What happened when Houston played Oklahoma last year? Houston lost by 4 in Norman. Houston finished 11th in the Big 12, right? We can start doing some of this funny hypothetical math if the SEC is going to. This is an asinine top 25 that we have from ESPN's FPI. So the point that I'm making in all of this, is actually something that kind of flies in the face of my defense, or at least showing you why, hey, Brett Yormark would argue for 5 plus 11, because this shows you some of the danger in that. Like, would Sankey be able to push his way toward a world where we're actually using ESPN FPI as like a legitimate thing to determine who is getting these at-large spots? I mean, to me, that's just as bad as saying that we're going to use TV numbers, which were floated out there as a crappy trial balloon idea from the SEC and Big Ten, probably strategically at one point, that we'd use TV ratings to decide what conferences would get what auto bids. Just as bad an idea to be using FPI. I mean, that's how little I respect FPI here, man. I mean, come on. And we run into this, man. We run into this so often with people just assuming, well, FPI's got to be right. Those teams are talented. Auburn and Oklahoma are more talented. It's got to be. Trust FPI on that. I'm searching for the tweet right now because I didn't have this totally ready to go. But this account, College Football Nerds, which I respect fine enough, have followed it for a while, but they had, I thought, just a really bad tweet. I may have scrolled past it. About this FPI reaction here that everybody was having. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Let me pull this up for you here. Like this perfectly, I think, illustrates the point and the problem that we face with using things like FPI. So people are complaining about the FPI rankings. College Football Nerd says the worst team in the SEC last year, Mississippi State, went 0-8 in conference. They went on the road and lost to the Big 12 champion by one score, 30-23. Arkansas, by contrast, beat Mississippi State 58-25. Okay. Well, you can just as easily, like this seem you see this and you think, oh, well, yeah, I mean, of course, right? SEC plays higher quality football. I'm not even going to mention the fact that it was 30-3 Arizona State in September, by the way, before that team clearly gelled and became a different beast by the end of the year. But they were up 30-3 in the third quarter before some garbage time points from Mississippi State there. Okay, but look how easy this is to just do the same thing on the other side. The last place team in the Big 12 who won 0 Big 12 games beat that same Arkansas team that was referenced there. Oklahoma State did not win a single Big 12 game. They went 3-9. They beat Arkansas. The 11th place team in the Big 12, Houston, lost by 4 at Oklahoma. Alabama lost by 21 at Oklahoma. You want to say, hey, that doesn't matter. Put up or shut up in the playoff. Well, the Big 12 champ was a 4th and 13 stop away from beating the SEC runner-up who lost the SEC title game in overtime by 3. They were a 4th and 13 stop away from beating them in the playoff. Like it just, these are ridiculous. We fall into this world, and this is a lot of the risk of 5+11 is that we fall even further and too far into that world where those type of things can start to grab hold. Now, luckily, I would say it seems like the tide has been turning a little bit on that, and we're seeing less and less of that, and more people are kind of waking up to this. Apparently, College Football Nerds, not one of those. Again, I think a pretty respectable account, but that was a disappointing one for me that was pretty easily dispelled. So that's the part of this you gotta really watch out, man. And this is where the delusion. This was one of the most alarming quotes from Ross Dellinger's latest piece. If we're talking about like where the delusion is with the SEC crowd right now. I'm reading from Ross Dellinger. Some SEC administrators here have wondered aloud this week if an SEC Big Ten only playoff is the right path. Quote, there would be no argument that the winner is the national champion, right? Asked one high-level SEC school official. I mean, look, literally this year, you've got a lot of people out there predicting Clemson, by the way, as the preseason number 1, or at least a preseason top 5 team. If we're going to just throw like a fact out there about how this year is shaping up, but just the unbelievable hubris there and the unbelievable short-sightedness of that comment, thinking, well, yeah, it's the way to go. Everyone thinks our 2 conferences are the best. Like, yeah, that's the way to go. Let's do it. Again, think about 10 years from now, man, when the shine and the luster of your USC Michigan conference games wear off a little bit and it's become professional football that's not the NFL and it's lost the soul of the sport and you've lost swaths of the country. That's not the right path, my friends. That's not the right path. Well, here we are. Let's get to some super chats. Jared, I appreciate you. Was there a comment below this? Let me double check, Jared, to make sure. I'm not seeing anything. I guess just some support there, Jared, which I appreciate immensely. If I am missing something from you, please do let me know in the chat. Michael, what's up, Michael? Good to see you, man. Michael says, we've seen with NIL that opportunity draws players. 4-4-2-2 kills that. 5+11 opens recruiting, spreads talent. The Big 12 stands a chance going forward. I think it's a better message to send recruiting. Now, you could I do tend to agree with you there. You could also counter that and just say, hey, if you go 3 years down the road and the Big 12's only been getting 1 and the SEC is getting like 6 or 7 every year, then if you run up against an SEC team at that point, the negative recruiting would just be, well, look, we get 6 times the amount of teams in the play. You got 6 times better shot at getting to the playoff here in our league than theirs, as opposed to 4-2. That gap is closed a little bit. So that is some of the risks that you're taking, how exactly that would play out. But I think in general, especially in the immediacy, you're going to take much worse negative recruiting from signing up for 4-4-2-2 and NIL. I mean, Michael, I know you're a BYU fan. Obviously, you guys know how that works. NIL definitely can help even the playing field. Texas Tech has absolutely shown that. So we shall see. We shall see where all that goes. But it's a good point that you bring up. Jared. All right, here we go, Jared. Do you know if there's been any discussion about a counter proposal of a 3-3-2-2-6 college football playoff format? So that would be 3-3-6, 8-10-16. First of all, if they were to do that, you'd have to have a 1 in there you'd have to have a group of 6. I assume any proposal like that would happen. There has not really been much discussion about that. I don't think that's anything the SEC and Big Ten would ever go for. And again, the problem is they don't have to. But there was, at least at one point, and Josh Pate talked about this, there was some discussion about, could you push for a 4-4, 2.5, 2.5, 1 plan. And what the 2.5 would mean is that every year there would be a 5th team from the Big 12 or ACC that would get a playoff bid. And it would depend. You'd have to figure out some way to determine that year by year. But you'd have either a 3rd Big 12 team or a 3rd ACC team every single year getting into the playoff. And that maybe that would have been the hill to die on and the thing to push for, which again comes back to the same math equation that we were doing earlier on in the show, right? Which is, if you are of the belief that the Big 12 and ACC are inferior conferences and always will be, then yeah, that's a great thing to negotiate for. Trying to get even one more team in, or a half, if you want to look at it that way, for your conference. But if you are of the belief that, hey, we're not an inferior conference, then you can't really do it. So that's how I would answer that, Jared. That's how I would answer that. David, what's up, David? Appreciate you, David. Thank you for being here. David says, John, we are truly getting to the point where the group schools need to break away from the Power 2 and provide us, the fans, with true college sports. I mean, it sounds very nice and self-righteous and triumphant in its idea, but then, man, I do feel like that's one you do it, you break away, and then you'd be sitting there like, oh man, this kind of sucks, right? Like we're doing this, huh? Not as many people care. As little as it feels like nationally, some people care about the Big 12 right now. Believe you me, that attention would go down even further if you did do that. I understand why some people say, hey, just go ahead and stop trying to cling on. Just cut it, put yourself out of your own misery, basically, is kind of the idea there. And just try to start and build whatever it is that you have there. And I'm sure some people genuinely do like that and genuinely do. I'm still somebody that, I don't know, I do want to cling. And it's not just clinging to some irrational hope, but man, how much time have I spent on this channel talking about Cody Campbell and the influence that he was starting to develop in this presidential commission, which doesn't seem dead, but it does seem at least tabled. And, we'll see when that could come back. President sure seemed pretty distracted today. But I still hold out at least some hope that can be something. And that leads me right into Wazoo revenge. Can anyone save it all? You're probably looking at Congress and or the White House to try and do that. And if Cody Campbell can wedge his way in there with enough influence, that would be something that could definitely help. Project Rudy is the thing, people. That's the ultimate best thing. Research Project Rudy. Go read more on Project Rudy. That's the way. That's the way to do it. That's the way to go. Appreciate all of you guys. If you have something, you got about 10 minutes left on the show tonight. Click the $sign below the chat box in order to get your question or comment on the show. Like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Appreciate everybody who does that. Make sure you're subscribed to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. Last thing, lighter note. Let's step away from the playoff stuff. It becomes a bummer. It gets old to talk about. Step away from the playoff stuff. Let's talk some actual football here, like what's happening on the actual field. One of the best things that happens is Athlon Sports doing its anonymous coach quotes. Okay. The anonymous coach quotes from each conference. We have the anonymous coach quotes about the Big 12. I have pulled what I thought were some of the most interesting. And in particular, there are a couple of quotes here about teams that these coaches basically think could be running the league moving forward. That I thought was the most compelling part about all this, but there are some good, keen insights on a lot of schools here. Okay, so I think people would be very interested in what it is that other coaches are saying about schools across the league when they're granted anonymity. All right, so Utah. All right, this is a pretty long quote about Utah. And I will admit, I read the Utah quotes. There were 4 or 5 of them. And I was like, well, it doesn't seem like the coaches are maybe quite as high on Utah as I am coming into this year. But here's one of the quotes on Utah. Quote, there's a lot of questions here, mainly on offense. Andy Ludwig and Cam Rising are gone, and they're going with a spread and RPO scheme. It's going to look very different than what we're used to from this program. Kyle Whittingham's teams are defined by their physicality, and this is going to be more of a tempo, bang, bang approach to keep pace in the league. Yeah, I hadn't really considered, okay, it will be just a different team stylistically. How much can that affect, if the offense is going quick 3 and out, if they're struggling to get it going at the beginning of the year, does that put more pressure on your defense? How will things integrate here? I will continue to say that I think bringing Devin Dampier's offensive coordinator with him should help smooth some of that out and mitigate some of the challenge. But it is still very much a challenge. And when you're a coach like Kyle Whittingham this late in your career, you can look at it and say, hey, he should be great at dealing with some kind of new integration into his program. Or you could look at it and say, man, old dog, new tricks. Like, how's that going to go? I think it's perhaps a little bit more risky than I had considered. But quite frankly, if you watch Utah's offense last year, they needed to do something. You needed total overhaul, total changes. If it was going to require some risk, you might as well do it. But that was my takeaway from Utah. It was kind of like, all right, doesn't seem like there's quite as much Utah optimism as I had there. Texas Tech, right? Arguably the most interesting team in the Big 12 this year because of what they did this offseason. Here's a quote from an anonymous coach. They're better pretty much everywhere, obviously, but don't assume you can spend your way to a power conference championship in one cycle. Don't get me wrong. All of us would rather have an NIL collective that's throwing a ton of cash instead of the alternative, but there's a lot of questions here. That's kind of the thing with Texas Tech, right? Like, how much in football can you really fix it this way? Basketball would be one where you would think, hey, less players on the court, easier to fix by just throwing a ton of money at the problem with NIL. And even in basketball, look no further than within the Big 12 in and of itself with K-State last year, or different scale, but Kansas. Kansas threw a bunch of money, got high-profile guys, Rylan Griffin, AJ Storr. Didn't work. Kansas, by their standards, had a horrible season. So it doesn't always work like that. Like throwing the money, even when it's a little less, it seems a little more doable in basketball because you don't need as many players there. Whereas Texas Tech football, they're asking the question, can you do it in one cycle? Which to me means more like, can you get enough players to really affect like quality depth across the board to make that significant of an impact? But even then, it's, can you integrate if you have more stars? How does all that mesh with your culture and all these things? I think all very fair questions. And it was interesting to me to see a coach reiterate that. K-State, I felt like, again, as a K-State guy here, right? I don't hide from that. I was a little surprised. I was like, man, they seem pretty positive on K-State. Particularly, there was a lot of Matt Wells love, who was going to be K-State's offensive coordinator this year. And will obviously work quite a bit with Avery Johnson. And here's a quote on Avery. One of the anonymous coaches in the Big 12 said, quote, Avery could be a superstar, a Heisman-level guy. But they've got to build up the talent around him. This could be one of the best and most creative offenses in the country this season if he continues to improve. I think if you want optimism as a K-State fan, that's where like Matt Wells comes in. Can he be more creative than K-State was last year with Avery? And some of that may well be because he was so young. That is fair. I'm not going to try and pin it all on Connor Riley there. But getting him a year older, working with a more experienced offensive coordinator, if you can get more creative, I do think K-State has some legit weapons on offense. I mean, they brought in a 5-star tight end. They've got Dylan Edwards, who's a year earlier. They brought in a couple of transfer receivers they really like, and they kept Jace Brown. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that he's got the weapons to be really effective. Another team that Big 12 coaches anonymously were very, very high on was Iowa State. A lot of Iowa State love. Here's a couple of quotes. One, just simply, they really could go to the Big 12 title game again. And the reason I'm going to read you this one is because I thought, on this, like, wait, it says Rocco is the real deal. Obviously talking about Rocco Becht. And he'll be better this season if they can install those transfer receivers in. And I thought, man, I was of the mind like, hey, Rocco Beck just lost two, a second and third round NFL starting wide receiver. Like are we really just going to say they're going to plug the transfer receivers in and he'll be better? I mean, I like the transfer receivers. They go to East Carolina, UCF, grab a couple of transfer receivers. I like what they got, but I don't know that that's replacing Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, right? Like, man, I don't know. That now, having said that, could Iowa State make the Big 12 championship game? Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, they could. And Rocco Becht is still a really good quarterback. He could be the best in the Big 12 this year. I just think that's what we'll find out with them is how much of it was having just elite wide receivers last year. Colorado, I bet you were all wondering what Big 12 coaches had to say about Colorado. Well, this was the quote that definitely drew headlines when it first got out there. Quote, "It's still a circus. That's not an insult to Dion, but it is." So we're going to call Colorado still a circus. Circus is probably a little strong. We've got a bigger circus in town in college football now with the Bill Belichick experience at North Carolina, which feels to me like it's taking some of the national circus mentality away from Colorado a little bit. Just my opinion from watching from the outside. In terms of the reality of the team, you had two quotes that I thought were like opposite sides of the fence here. So Colorado says they've turned over a ton in the portal and they're trying to make it out like it's a competition-based result, but they're really going to struggle on the offensive line because of transfers again. So there's one half, which is saying like, hey, they're still not going to have an offensive line. That's kind of been the deal for a while. They're still not going to have it. But then somebody else said, hey, Travis Hunter is so good, he overshadowed a really good position group in the secondary. Right now, that's their strength. If they can rework the front, the defense might be better overall. So some reason for optimism and something on the other side there for Colorado. Finally, come down the home stretch here. I told you there were two teams here that I thought anonymous coaches really felt like could be the ones that run the league moving forward. Let's start with BYU. BYU. Two statements here. One that Utah fans will really, really love. Well, both of these Utah fans will really, really love. But the first anonymous coach quote about BYU was, quote, "Picking up all the Utah guys in the portal was a pretty big statement for them." Picking up all the Utah guys in the portal was a pretty big statement for them. Whew. Utah fans, I'll just let that one sink in. BYU fans, how you feeling about that one? And then this to me, the much more interesting one. Quote, "I think they're a legit power in this league." Now, that's a statement. An opposing coach saying, I think BYU is a legit power in this league. There was another one of the quotes that said BYU absolutely could have won the Big 12 championship had they made it to that title game. So there was a lot of BYU love and a lot of Sataki love and a lot of general BYU program love, which I guess the difference between BYU and Utah in the quotes here, to me, I view them as a little more similar going into next year. If you were just reading these quotes and knew nothing else about Utah and BYU, you'd be like, oh, well, BYU is definitely in the better spot here out of the two. It's not even close. So there's that. I'll just float that one out there from the anonymous coaches. Baylor, one coach did say they could turn the corner and compete for the league title this season. I definitely do feel like that's a possibility. I like Baylor a lot. I'm pretty high on them. I think Robertson and Washington, that backfield is pretty damn dynamic. But I would have also said, hey, Dave Aranda can certainly figure out a defense that seemed to get better last year. But one of these anonymous coaches rather said defensively they were a mess even with Dave calling it. But they've turned over the personnel and some of the assistants. So still apparently thinking that Baylor's defense was a mess. Maybe the changes there will help. Just maybe a slightly more pessimistic, being like, all right, so there's a lot of change there on that side of the ball, and people thought they were a mess already, even with Aranda taking it back over. We'll see. All right, so who's the other team that coaches think could run the league? Well, who have I not mentioned yet? It's the defending Big 12 champs, Arizona State. Quote, "They're going to be at the top of the league for a while." So one of the opposing coaches is buying in on the young Kenny Dillingham, who is younger than me, just barely, but younger than me, and running a Big 12 championship caliber program. There's another quote here on Arizona State. "Our league is very volatile right now, so there's an idea another program might jump out of nowhere like these guys did. But it's hard to pick against them as the best right now. They won the league and return almost everybody." They do return almost everybody, but the one guy that we can talk about them not returning is a pretty big one. And I did just say Kenny Dillingham, pretty young coach, because you know what? Damn it. If you are in your mid 30s, like Kenny Dillingham is, you are young as hell. Totally very young person to be in your mid 30s. Take it from me. Okay. So, young coach handling expectations for the first time. How will that go? How will that go? We'll see. We'll see. All right, let's get to a couple of other super chats before I get out of here tonight. Wazoo Revenge, thank you for being here and for all your support tonight, my friend. I appreciate it. One last question about the playoff. If an ACC or Big 12 team won the national title, that would help, right? Absolutely, it would help. It would help a ton. I guess the one thing I would say, like if it's Clemson this year, maybe because they have been such a dynasty blue blood for a while, maybe it wouldn't help quite as much because people would kind of be like, well, they've been operating as an SEC team for a while anyway. But it would certainly help. Anything to break up the Big Ten SEC thing would really help. And that's been the crux of a lot of the arguments here about the place of the Big 12 and ACC long term in all of this is like, yeah, you guys have no shot at a national championship. You have no shot at winning it in this new playoff where you're going to have to win multiple games against that caliber of competition. So it would. I mean, the currency that will change this more than anything is absolutely winning playoff games against the SEC and Big Ten. That would have the biggest impact of anything that anybody can possibly do to move the needle here. Full stop. So you are correct about that, Wazoo Revenge. You are definitely correct about that. Alan, what's up, Alan? Thank you for being here. Appreciate you, man. Alan says, John, great insight on the evolution of college football and the Big 12's role. Ultimately, the solution is for Big 12 teams to beat the SEC every chance we get. 9 wins for KU this season. Rock Chalk Jayhawk Alan. Thank you, Alan. Appreciate your kind words as always, my friend. I didn't put any of the KU quotes in there because I just felt like they were a little bland, but there was one of them that was like, hey, Jalen Daniels is a potential star if they have the rest around him. Like they could surprise and be pretty good. I would say solid quotes about your Hawks for next year in the Athlon piece. So, yeah, I don't think 9 wins is out of the question at all. Appreciate you, Alan. And Alan wants to make sure he closes with, this is a good note to close on, Alan. Alan says, beat the SEC. Beat the SEC. Thank you for that, Alan. Appreciate all of you for being here. Fun to get back in action tonight, obviously. Never a shortage of things to talk about going on here. Please like the video as you exit. Please subscribe to the channel. I appreciate everybody who does that. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. I've got one coming to your inbox hot and heavy tomorrow. If you want like further reading, you want to go more in depth on all this stuff that we just talked about tonight with the playoff, the future of the playoff format, come into your inbox, ofbnews.com to get subscribed to that. You can also click the link in the description of this video. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your week. And I should be talking to you here very shortly. Take care.